Kia ora koutou katoa. The story of Cain and Abel in the 4th chapter of the book of Genesis is one most preachers avoid. It has a difficult God. It has an evasive lesson. Why is Abel favored? Because he farms animals, and Cain unfavored because he farms crops. Does not this God of favorites bear some responsibility for the violence that then ensued? And why, oh why, is this story included in the Bible? Scholars think this is a very old community fable, originating from around 1200 BCE, when the Israelite people founded hilltop villages in central Palestine. The conditions for farming were difficult. Thin layer of topsoil that could easily be washed away in the rainy seasons, and a hot baking sun when the rains weren't in season. To survive, these villages created terraces to hold soil, cisterns to hold water, and they diversified their economy: wheat, barley, figs, grapes, as well as sheep and goats. Cain and Abel represent the economy of the village. In the fable, there is no indication that Cain was not offering his best produce to the deity, or that Cain was a lazy or incompetent farmer. Rather, Cain's not doing well is just a roll of the agricultural dice. This year, the crops didn't do as well as the livestock. Next year, it might be the other way round. That's why you have a diversified economy. That's why the Cains and Abels need each other. That's why they're brothers. Unfortunately, the God in the fable is very unattractive. He, it's often a he, seems to choose favorites, allocate blame, and dish out punishments. And unfortunately, too, this God of favorites is later picked up by interpreters, readers of the Bible who want a partisan God who punishes others and allocates blame. So this God in this text has been used to justify the slaughter of the agrarian Canaanites by the nomadic and pastoralist descendants of Abraham in the post-Egypt period. Yes, the Sunday school stories of Joshua and the Jerichos are stories of genocide. This text of Cain and Abel was certainly used in the 19th century in America as part of the rationale for slavery. African Americans were said to have the mark of Cain. And the God of favorites continues to pop up throughout history when one people, group, or leader want a divine mandate to hate or destroy another group, people, or leader. I think we always need to be wary, particularly in times of tension and conflict, particularly on days like today, ANZAC Day, when we remember soldiers and their families. When God is introduced to favor what we have done and are doing, and what our opposition hasn't and isn't. But the Cain and Abel fable is not being told to show up this God's deficiencies, but to convey an important truth about community. Namely, that competition and envy can destroy community, and everyone loses when there is violence. In the story, Cain doesn't accept that his poor productivity that year was due to the role of the agricultural dice. No, he smarted from the lack of recognition. He seethed because his brother got praise. His countenance fell because he wasn't being appreciated. This is a dangerous attitude for someone in a hilltop farming village to have. Because in that kind of community, the unflagging and wholehearted effort of every laborer is needed. Attitude can breed envy. Envy can breed violence, and violence can cripple community. When Cain kills Abel, presumably out of jealousy, with the god of favorites complicit, Cain not only removes Abel's energy and skill from the village workforce, but also, because no small community can tolerate a murderer, his own. To remove two young men from the labor force of a tiny hill community in which every hand is crucial is to significantly reduce that community's chances of survival. This is not too dissimilar to the New Testament parable about two brothers, which we know of as the prodigal son. The crime, so-called, of the prodigal was taking his resources, his inheritance, out of the community farming unit, and thus threatening that unit's viability. And the crime of the father in that story was to let him. So the thesis recent scholarship is suggesting is that the Cain and Abel fable was told and retold and ended up in the Torah, first 5 books of our Bible, because the sin of Cain was to endanger his community. It's a warning tale. Envy that leads to murder is not just a crime against an individual. It is more importantly a crime against the community, threatening its survival. There is one other piece to this fable that we need to note, and that is the authorship. As you may know, the book of Genesis was formed by braiding 3 originally independent narratives, each with a different author. Scholars refer to these authors as P, J, and E. P was the compiler author of the first creation story in Genesis 1, where humans were told by the deity to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. The Hebrew word here, rendered subdue, means forceful subjection, a word used elsewhere in Scripture to describe enslavement and rape. J was the compiler author of the second creation story in Genesis 2 and following. According to J, the purpose of humans was to till the soil and keep it. The Hebrew word rendered till connotes serving, and the word rendered keep connotes guarding and protecting. The task of the human is to cooperate with the soil and care for it. And it is J who brought us the Cain and Abel saga. J's context is cooperating with each other and the earth in an ecologically fragile environment. Cain's sin, so to speak, is the self-centeredness of competition and envy when the precarious context of the community needs a strong ethic of cooperation. The lesson of the fable therefore speaks to the fragility of the life on this planet today and the need to pull together as the people in the hilltop villages once did, remembering our dependence on the earth, its plants and animals, and of course, on each other. Today is ANZAC Day, a day some of us approach, frankly, with ambivalence. We want to honor our dead, victims of war, both military and civilian, and both those who died and those who carried on living with the physical and or mental scars. We want to honor courage, both of the soldiers, those who stayed home, and those who conscientiously objected. We also want to honor survival and survivors. And we want to pledge our support for a demilitarized world where solutions are found without killing each other. Gallipoli is a apt backdrop for our remembrance. Battles poorly led, a military disaster, and where we were the invaders of another's homeland. Our soldiers, boys really, were victims and survivors of a political and strategic mess. A mess inspired and aided by politicians and the majority of the populace who supported them. My ANZAC ambivalence is about both the use of religious language that seems to suggest that death is redemptive. The word sacrifice needs deletion. And the quandary of how to honor our war dead without encouraging current and future wars and the death they bring. The Cain and Abel fable placed alongside ANZAC also brings perspective. We can't afford to kill each other anymore. Planetary life is too precarious. The economic and ecological effects of war are huge. Our planet can't afford the competition and envy that leads to murder. We need to cooperate, not just within a nation, but transnationally, globally. We need to pull together as a species to survive. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers, and they are ours. We need to serve, guard, and protect our planet and all the life it sustains. Everybody loses when there is violence. There are no longer, if there ever were, winners in war.